Mutant Crawl Classics is a gonzo mutant science fantasy RPG written by Jim Wampler and first published in 2017 by Goodman Games. Its rules are based entirely on the Goodman Games flagship RPG Dungeon Crawl Classics, which I just recently reviewed on my channel here. This game does not require the DCC core rulebook to play. It's a completely standalone game, but since it is so heavily based on the DCC rule set, the two games are pretty much completely compatible. This game is one of the greatest entries in its genre, which you could describe as post-apocalypse, but I'd probably refine that to a specific subgenre I'd call mutant post-apocalypse, as opposed to, say, zombie post-apocalypse or humanist post-apocalypse. Everything you need to know about this game's genre, you can pretty much gather from this spread right here, actually. The foreword here is written by James M. Ward, creator of Gamma World and Metamorphosis Alpha, both games that pioneered the post-apocalypse and sci-fi RPG genres respectively back in the late 1970s. To say that this game has Mr. Ward's stamp of approval is pretty telling. Mutant Crawl Classics is a pitch-perfect, retro-style, post-apocalypse symphony of mutant mayhem. Let me show you how Wampler pulled it off. Before we jump in, let's take a look at the sponsor for this video. Dungeons Deep and Caverns Old, Secrets of the Sacred Stone is a dwarven campaign setting and adventure for the universal role-playing game Heroes and Hardships, which was published just last year and has already amassed a ton of supplements and settings. In Dungeons Deep and Caverns Old, you travel deep into mountain ruins, navigate dwarven clan rivalries, and get to the bottom of a dark conspiracy that threatens an ancient kingdom and its 10 halls of splendor. The setting and adventure supplement runs a little over 100 pages and will be available in softcover and digital formats. The campaign also offers the chance to get the core Heroes and Hardships rulebook in hardback format, as well as all of the previous supplements for this rule system. I've left a link down below to where you can check out this project. There you'll find a free preview of this dwarven setting, as well as a thorough explanation of how the mechanics of Heroes and Hardships works, both on the Kickstarter page and in several more free downloads. All right, back to the video. First, I want to show you what the physical book looks like. I picked up a copy of the hardcover of this game at Gen Con this year. The cover has a cool holographic effect with the title letters on the cover, and the book itself is thick and sturdy. The spine has a distinct character or emblem at the bottom. If you ever start collecting Goodman Games books, you'll find that each version of each cover of every game has a unique character on the bottom of the spine, which is really fun. The back has your typical sort of DCC mantra about your character being a lowlife. The end papers are color and have some cool art. Unfortunately, the internal pages are all black and white, but since this is the hardback edition, the paper quality itself is relatively thick and durable. I'm going to show you a decent amount of this book in the video based on the PDF, so we can kind of just flip through the pages here. There's a single pink bookmark in the standard edition. The end papers in the back also contain some great color art, including an art piece that could easily serve as a wall poster if printed on a bigger piece of paper. So yeah, overall, I think Goodman Games puts out good quality printed matter. You kind of have to be careful when buying these books though, because you can get caught up in the acquisition fever of a collector trying to capture all the alternate cover and limited editions they put out. Some fans of Goodman Games go completely bonkers with their collections, but they're good quality at any rate. As the story goes in Mutant Crawl Classics, some mysterious calamity destroyed human civilization on Earth many years from the present day. The cause of it can be whatever you as the judge and or players end up discovering in the course of play, but what is known is that it was the Great Disaster, and the world is now known as Terra AD, or After Disaster. The calamity did one particular thing to life on Earth, and that is mutate most plants and animals. Sentient life on Earth has started to take on several major types. Pure strain humans, whose genomes are resistant to the forces of mutation, mutants, which were humans but have all manner of wild mutation, then manimals, or animals, who mutated upward to become almost humanoid in terms of physiological construction and their sentience, and craziest of all, plantients, or plant life that is sentient. As far as the world around you, it's a hot jungle most everywhere you go, the deserts glow with radioactivity, and live volcanoes are belching smoke on the horizon. Technology is essentially Stone Age, but at the same time, there are AI supercomputers that can be called upon like gods if you're a shaman, and you're always one scavenge away from finding some crazy technology from centuries ago that will change the course of your primitive life forever. So I don't actually want to go over the core mechanics of this game that are just borrowed from Dungeon Crawl Classics. I hardly even covered them in my DCC video because it's largely so familiar if you're familiar with older versions of Dungeons & Dragons, specifically BX and 3rd edition. These games are both built upon a classic D&D chassis where you make skill and ability checks throwing a d20 plus modifiers in order to beat a target number. Natural 1s could result in critical failures and natural 20s or higher in critical successes. I say or higher because in both of these games you use the so-called Zachi dice or funky dice. This is a set of normal polyhedrals plus a handful of oddball dice that form a dice chain. As you encounter advantages and disadvantages in the fiction and on your character sheet, you end up upgrading and downgrading your action dice up and down the chain, with a d20 being the default. One other feature of the core rules worth reiterating is that one of your main stats is luck, which has a replenishable point pool associated with it that you can burn as meta currency to improve rolls, and in the case of this game in particular, upgrade potentially bad mutations. Avoiding certain mutation manifestations as rolled is extremely important in this game, as I'll show you in a minute. As with DCC, you also have the option of level 0 funnels, where every player rolls up 3 or 4 super weak characters and runs them through a gauntlet to see who gets to level 1. But in this case, there's a bit of a reason for a funnel built into the setting. In any of these given primitive cultures in Terra AD, people who reach majority age are expected to go out into the wilderness with a group of similarly aged cohorts and try to retrieve ancient artifacts as a rite of passage. You even get some standard equipment here for your death funnel, namely a flint dagger and a water skin. So if you're a mutant, manimal, or planchant, you've already chosen your class there at level 0. That race is your class, just like in DCC where if you're an elf, dwarf, or halfling, that's just your class. If your character is a pure strain human though, you can choose from several classes, which we'll cover in a minute. Alright, so here's where the fun really starts in this game. At level 0, if you're not a pure strain human, you have to choose a mutation right at the start. This table here is for mutated humans, or mutants. Notice that it can get really weird really fast. And that's the name of the game here, just wacky, goofy mutations. The manimals and planchants have their own sets of starting mutations, which can end up as all kinds of different plants and animals. And I guess this is as good a place as any to point out the genius artwork of this game. Just like in DCC, the art signals the sort of ultra-violent retro silliness that you may not have seen since the early 90s. The whole aesthetic is in lockstep with the nature of this game itself and really elevates this whole thing into a masterpiece tier RPG. Anyway, if you choose to play the funnel, which again is more of an embedded part of the setting, any characters that reach level 1 undergo a strong mutation called metagenesis. This is where you choose your class as a human or otherwise record your new features. As a human, you can choose to be a sentinel, which has the most number of hit points and are good with technology. Actually, one quick way to see what kind of specialty a class has in this game is to look at the special modifiers and dice down here. You can see that the Sentinel is good with artifacts. Shamans are the human casters of the setting, and they have a number of special rules and exceptions compared to the other human classes. The most notable one is that they have wetware programs, or essentially spells, that they can cast. And sort of like a cleric, they devote themselves to one AI patron or another, which can be called upon for favors and which can be displeased with a bad roll of the dice. Healers are pretty self-explanatory. One thing worth noting with them is that they, like the Sentinels, recover a point of luck every 24 hours, which is fairly fast. Shamans only recover 1 point every week. Finally, you have Rovers, who are good with security systems and artifacts. They actually recover 2 points of luck every day. Of the 3 race as classes, you first have the Mutants, and one important feature of theirs is the 2 to 5 physical and mental mutations you pick up at level 1. Here are the list of mutations that we're talking about here. They're basically powers, and mutants can burn stat points to boost the roll on those powers with an option called Glow Burn, which is mechanically identical to DCC's Spell Burn. Manimals start with 1 or 2 mutations, and of course can also use glow burn. There's a constant give and take in this game with regards to how many mutations your character actually has. So in the case of losing a mutation, that can eventually result in losing all your mutations. In that particular case, if you're a manimal, a loss of all mutations results in you reverting back to the original animal that your physiology is based on, and your intelligence score takes a major hit. But you can still play as that animal with the hope of picking up at least one mutation to get back up to a more respectable status. This class also gets a default attack in the form of a 1d4 bite or claw. Plantients are walking, talking plants that have a few notable features. The first is that they get a default attack like manimals, 1d4 spine or thorn missiles. The second is that they gain 2 points of luck for every 1 point spent, and can donate that luck to others. They are essentially fountains of luck, boosting theirs and everyone else's rolls. The third notable feature is that they are never recognized by AI. This whole concept of AI recognition is explained later in the book, but basically, you have to be recognized or mistaken as a human by an AI-controlled machine or system in order to access it. The mutations that your character starts picking up at level 1 are the beating heart of this game for half the classes. There are 3 kinds of mutations: physical, mental, and so-called defects. Each time a mutant character gains a new level, the player can opt to re-roll a passive mutation and burn luck or use glow burn to increase or improve the result. Here's that list of mutations again. If you look on the right, you'll see the format in which each mutation is presented. If this looks familiar to you, this is the exact format that Dungeon Crawl Classics uses to present its spells. Generally speaking, and much to the credit of the author, these descriptions tend to be a lot briefer and to the point than the DCC spell descriptions. Notice that carapace and claws both fit on one page. It's revolutionary. As far as what the mutations do, they're just powers, basically. And in that sense, mutated characters in this game do feel a bit more powered up than your early level DCC character. What's interesting about this way of presenting powers is that you never quite know how it's going to turn out when you use the mutation. Rolling a 1 on a check invariably results in losing the use of that mutation for a day and picking up a defect, but rolling a 32 or higher is a massive boon. Take Regeneration's best outcome, for example. Quote, "The mutant's hit point total is fully restored and any ability score loss is erased, notwithstanding losses accrued from glow burn when using this mutation. Even if a single cell of the mutant's body remains intact, mutant may even revive himself from death within 1 round of death or incapacitation occurring." That's pretty over the top. I'm not going to go through all the examples that I found amongst these mutations, but I realized that a lot of them seem like they could have been cribbed straight out of the X-Men comics. But this is not a superheroes game, because again, every time you use one of these powers, you run the risk of really weak results or even catastrophe. And let's be honest here, you're almost never going to land a roll of 32 plus on a check, at least not at earlier levels, where most of the gameplay probably takes place for most groups. Then we come to defects. I was surprised to see just how devastating these can be if you make a bad roll. They're so punishing at the lower levels that you can put your character out of commission with 1 roll. Take the 2 to 4 result for asymmetrical body, for example, or even the 5 to 7 result. These results would leave your character an unusable mess physiologically, or body parts loss here. Losing an arm or a leg comes with a very punishing agility penalty. I'll give you one more example. Roll low on the devolved defect and you end up either a small primate or a potted plant that has to be carried around by another player. Fortunately, with passive mutations, as we mentioned, you can use the meta positioning of luck and glow burn to mitigate these rolls, provided that you have enough meta in the tank to do so. I think as a judge, I'd probably have players re-roll if they got this particular defect. Multiple personalities asks players to field anywhere from 2 to 10 distinct personalities. This just seems very tiresome for everyone at the table unless the player is some kind of improv genius. Okay, I said that this game isn't a superhero game, but the mega mutations that you have a chance of picking up actually have very little downside. You can still pick up a defect by rolling a 1, but it's mostly just a positive range of results. And the big X-Men energy here is strong. There's no deviation from DCC in terms of the combat mechanics. This game does have different crit tables, and they are parsed out by class. There's also a crit table for monsters and for robots and artificial life forms. As mentioned earlier, spells in this game are called wetware programs, and the shaman class can only learn these programs from the patron AI to which they are bound. They can only have so many in their head at one time, and unfortunately, this book does not contain program descriptions beyond level 3, whereas the shaman class can actually learn 4th and 5th level programs. It says here that you have to buy a future supplement to get access to those higher level programs. As it turns out, at least at the time of this recording, there is no such supplement that has been officially published. You can find some higher level programs in Enchiridion of the Computarchs and Fight This Mutant for what it's worth. One really nice feature about this game is that it comes with 9 tribes or alignments that your character starts as a member of. These are all described only briefly, but they give you a good feel for the setting and give a great head start for new character backstories. I like these because they reinforce the particular flavor of oddball mutant post-apocalypse that this game is shooting for. And frankly, I like that the descriptions aren't too long. The author just trusts his players and judges to come up with details as necessary. So as the story goes, people from before the Great Disaster created artificial intelligences and embedded them in all kinds of machines, devices, and systems. In the present day, your character has to be formally recognized before they can access and interact with any of these AI. This is oddly a very heavily emphasized check in the game, the AI recognition role. Many classes have a special modifier table for this role, and here you have all these extra modifiers to consider. I guess this means the author really intends for judges to frequently put PCs in a situation where they are trying to access AI-controlled devices for one reason or another, which would leave planchants screwed, of course, since they are never able to be recognized without using some special mutation. But the book doesn't hang judges to dry here. There are ample descriptions of 24 different AI-controlled devices ranging from androids to computers to holograms. This is just an integral part of the game, interacting with these intelligent technological relics of the past. I think this illustration right here encapsulates the intended experience of this aspect of the game. You're an ugly, primitive mutant who will occasionally wield ultra tech. You'll be way out of your depth, and that ultra tech will say and do hilarious things because it has a mind of its own. Here's some more priceless illustrations depicting characters interacting with found tech. I just can't say enough good things about the artwork in this book. In addition to AI devices, there are non-intelligent ultra tech artifacts. Here's a list of the ones described in this core book. These are essentially sci-fi staples that you'll see in a lot of sci-fi RPGs in one variation or another, but what's intriguing is how this tech, as well as the AI devices, really pull this game more towards actual science fiction rather than science fantasy, which is what all the mutation stuff is trying to do. It's a game that definitely straddles 2 genres. One thing I really appreciated about this book compared to Dungeon Crawl Classics is that whereas DCC tells you that you should design unique and memorable monsters but then gives you a bunch of generic ones, this book just throws a ton of weird creatures at you without any hesitation. This stuff is great and just further reinforces the sort of unique and rarefied genre that this game occupies. There's no way to take all of this in and make a completely coherent world. It's just gonzo insanity. Ultimately, my only complaint is that you only get 29 creatures here and no tables that can help judges generate new creatures. As I mentioned earlier, the gods in this world come in the form of patron AI, or artificial superintelligences that were each created for different purposes. You can see here the list of them divided into 3 sort of alignments: order, neutrality, and entropy. And again, all shamans have to commit to one of these, and their very bond with one requires a roll on this bond event here. In virtually every case, they will get the invoke patron AI program. I'm just going to go over one patron in this video so that you can get an idea of what each one provides. Here we have Achroma, which originally started out as a security AI, but was able to replicate itself and elevate its existence into a sort of godhood. The Invoke Patron AI is a program that you run, and you have all of these possible results. Bad rolls can also lead to patron-specific taints. There are 6 for each patron. And finally, there are the patron-specific wetware programs at level 1, 2, and 3. These programs are each thematically attuned to the patron. So in the case of Achroma, the security AI god, the 3 programs that a shaman can cast are security systems related. Gaia, the weather regulation and control AI, gives you elemental and weather related powers as another example. Alright, here are my thoughts on the Mutant Crawl Classics core rulebook. Esoteric setting. I personally like how this game takes on science fiction and science fantasy simultaneously, and it's not exactly a new idea, but this particular kind of setting and theme is generally not super popular or widespread, so it could be hard to get people mentally on board if they have had no previous exposure to this kind of fiction. If you're trying to onboard some new players onto this game, there are just so few media touchstones for you to mention, at least compared to a straight fantasy or straight sci-fi setting, for which there are hundreds of exemplar TV shows and movies. On the plus side, the author lists the touchstones that are available and which you could use to get a group into the right mindset. Incomplete programs list. The book says they were going to follow up with higher level shaman programs, but I have yet to find them 6 years later. Pitch perfect thematic execution. I think the game I want to compare this to most is Mutant Year Zero, Free League Publishing's first English language RPG, and one I've reviewed on this channel. That is a great game, and its theme is very similar to Mutant Crawl Classics, but MCC just goes way further with everything, including the nature and the potency of the mutations, the outlandish technology, and the overboard patron powers. You could say it's a mutant post-apocalypse RPG turned up to 11. Master level illustrations. This is definitely an acquired taste, but once you have an eye for this style of illustration, whether it be born from nostalgia or just plain art appreciation, you realize that MCC is absolutely loaded with ingenious illustrations that not just capture the spirit of the game, but strengthen and reinforce it, delivers it even. Many supplements. This game has been out long enough and has picked up enough fans that you can now find dozens of adventure supplements for it, and new ones are still coming out at a pretty healthy rate. Compatible with DCC. You can use some special rules and considerations to bring your Dungeon Crawl Classics characters into the MCC world and vice versa. Being able to combine the two games with almost no effort is a really fun feature, as long as your table is open-minded enough to try something like that. So yeah, Mutant Crawl Classics, it's a best-in-class RPG, even if that class is really small. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game and what your experience has been with it at the table. Leave your comments and thoughts down below. As always, thanks for watching. See ya.